In the quiet heart of Texas, where the sun sets slow and the wind carries stories across the plains, how does a man stay true to himself while the world tries to turn him into something else? Can a voice born from dust and devotion still echo across generations without ever shouting for attention? George Strait never needed the spotlight to shine. He just kept singing, and the world listened. Long before he became the king of country, George Harvey Strait Sr. was just a boy from Poteet, Texas, living a life full of dirt roads, sweat, and Sunday values. Raised in nearby Pearsall, surrounded by hard work and heartfelt music, he learned early what mattered most: family, honesty, and the kind of quiet strength you can't fake. There wasn't anything flashy about the way he walked into country music, but maybe that's what made him so unforgettable. As a teenager, George listened to the voices of country legends like Hank Williams, Merle Haggard, and George Jones. Not just for their sound, but for the truth in their lyrics. Their music wasn't just background noise. It was a way of life. That simplicity and sincerity shaped the way George saw the world. After high school, he tried college but soon found himself in uniform, serving in the U.S. Army. Stationed in Hawaii, far from Texas fields and familiar skies, George didn't drift away from his roots, he dug deeper. Performing with an Army-sponsored band called Rambling Country, he discovered something inside him that no one else could give. A voice that connected, a presence that could move hearts without ever raising its volume. When his military service ended, he returned to Texas, not to chase fame, but to finish his degree in agriculture at Southwest Texas State University. That choice said everything. George was never chasing lights or luxury. He was grounded, tied to the land, the values, and the lifestyle he'd always known. But music never left him, and in 1981, the world heard what Texas had known all along. Unwound, hit the airwaves like a storm on a still day, signaling something real in a sea of glossed-up pop country sounds. That song wasn't just a debut. It was a declaration. George Strait wasn't going to change for country music. He was going to bring country music back to what it was meant to be. His first album, Strait Country, wasn't trying to impress. It was simply honest. And that honesty hit harder than any gimmick ever could. Over the next 4 decades, George became the quiet giant of country music, releasing over 30 studio albums, each one filled with heart, twang, and lyrics that didn't need to shout to be heard. Songs like Amarillo by Morning, The Chair, and I Cross My Heart weren't just chart toppers, they became part of people's lives. They played at weddings, funerals, long drives, and lonely nights. His voice became a comfort, a friend, and sometimes a way home. George Strait's achievements read like something out of fiction. 60 #1 hits, the most in any genre. Over 100 million records sold. Grammy wins. CMA Entertainer of the Year titles. In 2006, the Country Music Hall of Fame opened its doors to a man who never asked for recognition, only to sing with sincerity. He did it all without scandals, without spectacle, and without ever forgetting who he was. While others chased headlines, George stayed focused on the music. And when he finally announced his farewell tour in 2013, fans knew it wasn't about ego, it was about closing one chapter with grace. The Cowboy Rides Away tour ended in Arlington, Texas, before more than 100,000 fans. It wasn't just a concert, it was a collective goodbye to a way of doing things that was becoming all too rare. Even after that farewell, George never fully disappeared. He returned for select shows, Texas residencies, and special events, still giving his voice to the people who cherished it. He also poured time into charities, mentorship, and honoring the roots that shaped him. That sense of loyalty wasn't just public. It was deeply personal. George's life off stage remained as steady as his rhythm on it. In December 1971, he and his high school sweetheart Norma Voss eloped to Mexico. It was a quiet beginning to a love story that's lasted over 50 years. Together, they faced the joys and storms of life, raising 2 children and holding on to the kind of bond that doesn't make headlines, but makes everything else possible. Their daughter, Jennifer Lynn, was born in 1972 and filled their early years with laughter and light. As George's career rose in the 1980s, he never let success pull him away from his family. Their son Bubba came along in 1981, inheriting not just his father's work ethic but the same Texas grit. While George sang on stage, Bubba took a different kind of spotlight, becoming a standout in rodeo and graduating from Texas A&M. It was never about following footsteps, it was about honoring the same values. But life doesn't spare even the strongest hearts. In 1986, Tragedy came like a thief in the night. Jennifer was just 13 when a car accident took her life. The pain was unspeakable, and George did what few celebrities would do. He stepped away from the public, choosing silence over spectacle. He grieved quietly, letting time and family be the only healers. Out of that darkness, he and Norma created the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation, a quiet but powerful tribute, helping children through causes in education, health, and the arts. It was their way of turning heartbreak into something that could help others, and of honoring a daughter whose spirit still lives in every good thing they do. In 2006, as George stood in the arena watching Bubba compete in the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, he wasn't just a proud father. He was a man watching his values carried forward. It was in that moment, ropes flying, dust rising, that his life came full circle. From a boy in Pearsall to a legend in arenas, everything had stayed the same where it mattered most. Faith, family, purpose. For all his achievements, George Strait never chased the noise. But recently, in a rare and deeply personal moment, he chose to speak about someone else. A fellow country giant whose path ran parallel in many ways. Toby Keith entered country music in the 90s like a firecracker in a quiet room. Bold, unfiltered, and deeply patriotic. While George sang with restraint and classic tones, Toby brought grit and rebellion. Yet underneath the different styles, George saw something familiar. A love for storytelling, a respect for the genre, and a shared understanding that music matters most when it speaks for people. At 73, George didn't have to say anything. But he did. And what he said carried the kind of weight only time can give. He spoke of Toby Keith's fearless lyrics, especially the ones that sparked conversations across America. Songs like Courtesy of the Red, White and Blue, and American Soldier. But George didn't stop at the music. He talked about the man, his courage, his humor, and his relentless fight against stomach cancer. George admired Toby's refusal to slow down, to keep performing, keep creating, even when pain could have easily kept him away. He didn't try to steal the moment. He honored it. He said what needed to be said. That Toby Keith, with all his fire, stood tall as a voice for people who often go unheard. And in doing so, George reminded everyone that country music has room for all kinds of truth-tellers, rebels, cowboys, poets, and patriots. In that tribute, George gave more than respect. He gave a glimpse into his own reflections. Because as time moves forward and voices begin to fade, what matters isn't how high you climbed, but how true you stayed. His words carried the weight of a career spent doing just that. Staying true, staying grounded, and letting the music do the talking. This was more than one legend tipping his hat to another. It was a reminder that behind every song is a story, behind every spotlight is a soul, and behind every silence is a man who's seen more than he says. George Strait didn't have to speak. But when he did, the world paused. Because when a legend like him chooses to open his heart, even for a moment, it becomes history. In the end, George Strait's story isn't just about country hits or broken records. It's about a life built on values that never went out of style. He showed that you can lead without demanding attention, love deeply without saying too much, and honor others without stealing the light. His music, his words, and his quiet presence have become threads in the fabric of American country music. And now, as he speaks from a place of wisdom, age, and reflection, we're reminded why his voice still matters. Not just for what it sings, but for what it stands for. If this story moved you, or if you've ever found comfort in the music of George Strait or the powerful spirit of Toby Keith, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's more to share, more to remember, and always, more stories waiting in the silence.